The environment. We all share it. We all care about it. We all neglect it in one way or another. Scientific evidence suggests post-industrial pollution has had a significant impact on the environment around the world.
Glaciers have melted, reefs withered away, natural resources dwindled, islands have even disappeared. The world cannot afford to allow this to happen forever.
However, environmental legislation is very expensive and requires a lot of effort from a lot of people. It's like trying to order pizza for a party while 13 drunk people are all asking you when they're going to do the cheesy bites thing again.
For all of us, the Cheesy Bites represent a healthy environment. It's something we all want, but nobody wants to chip in the extra money to make it happen. We are faced with a very special contradiction. Do we spend the significant amount of money to make a significant difference by the end of our lifetimes? Or do we continue to allow the environment to deteriorate, hoping we can make a miraculous change later on when we really need it?
Who is responsible for preserving the environment? Should it be a combined effort between nations? Should everyone just get in touch with their inner hippie and buy a tie-dye kit and some reusable hemp-woven shopping bags? Let's address these questions as soon as we can. Thank you for watching The World Tonight.
Tonight in the news, a game of nuclear I'm not touching you continues in southern Asia. According to the Associated Press, an Indian military strike near the Pakistani border in Kashmir killed 2 soldiers in late September. 10 days earlier, suspected rebels snuck into an Indian base in Kashmir and killed 17. Come on, India and Pakistan. When it comes to Kashmir, sharing is caring, and we don't mean bullets. We understand that sometimes it feels like the only thing you have in common is a border, but you both love cricket, so get out there and settle your differences on the cricket court, or whatever. Speaking of courts,
On September 28th, the Senate and the House voted to override President Obama's veto on the controversial 9/11 Victims Bill. The bill allows families and victims of the September 11th terrorist attacks to sue Saudi Arabia in district courts for its involvement, suing one of the most economically powerful states in the Middle East in district courts. We aren't going to say this bill is ridiculous, but it sure is going to feel ridiculous when your court date with King Salman gets delayed by the guy disputing a ticket he got for perpendicular parking.
the animal rights group Stop Animal Exploitation Now issued a complaint with WSU in late September. It is the 4th complaint in 4 months related to animal rights. WSU says the claims are exaggerated. But we all know the only animal abuse going on around here is against the Huskies at the Apple Cup. Go Cougs.
Jacob, we've lost 6 out of the last 7, the last 3 in the row. And the Huskies are one of the best teams in the nations right now. Don't get too eager to abuse animals.
Of course not. No one should want to abuse animals, and no one should want to abuse our main topic tonight, the environment. Places all around the world have experienced unseasonable weathers as a result of climate change caused by humans. One of those places is our very own Palouse.
Now to our local correspondent, Majestic Storm.
One of the most noticeable effects of climate change is crop failure. Environmental researchers estimate about a $10 billion loss in crops solely from droughts and heat waves. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, climate change has had the greatest impact in tropical areas. Areas like India, Nigeria, Brazil, and the Pacific Islands. The span of these effects show that climate change reaches far. It even reaches Pullman, Washington. Keep in mind, climate change does not necessarily mean the globe is warming. Overall, the world is experiencing increasing temperatures, but some places are having unseasonably cold weather. Palouse wheat farmer Dan Harder said the fluctuations in weather towards the end of the summer ruined his harvest. He says this year was one of the most beautiful harvests he had ever had, but by the end of the summer, he lost $80,000. In Pullman, I'm Majestic Storm.
Thanks, Majestic.
Now with national news, Eli Clayton and Rachel Wood.
In April of this year, there was a nuclear waste leaking at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation less than 10 miles away from the Tri-Cities. A routine inspection of one of the oldest tanks found high levels of radiation. According to Northwest Public Radio, a source at the reservation said the radiation levels were serious and urgent.
While that does sound like a terrifying and cliche start to a superhero comic, you may be wondering why this affects the environment. Well, Hanford has more than 50 million gallons of radioactive sludge that is stored in old tanks underground. Now they are leaking this leftover plutonium from World War II weapons production not that far from the Columbia River. Workers at Hanford also reported going to the hospital after vapors made them feel ill.
These Vape Nation people need to give it a rest. Last year, Hanford became part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. People are allowed to tour the reactor that produced plutonium for one of the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan.
This place tainted with nuclear waste is a park? Next thing you know, all these kids will be showing up and jumping in glowing green puddles, hoping they'll turn into Spider-Man.
According to the Department of Energy, the groundwater is contaminated with both radioactive and chemically toxic material. Workers have made progress treating a significant bloom near the Columbia River. Since radioactive contaminants cannot be destroyed or detoxified, cleanup actually means stabilization and immobilization. The Department of Ecology made a compendium detailing the amount of waste that made its way into the river. However, the report says nothing about how there will be a radioactive mega salmon coming from the water with a vengeance. Look out, fishermen, they've tasted the bait and now they're coming for revenge.
Now, Rachel, I would say let's stop being ridiculous and move on, but our next topic involves the Senate, so let's just move on. In February of 2015, Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe wanted to prove to the eggheads that climate change was all a hoax. He decided to do that by bringing a snowball onto the Senate floor.
Inhofe completely discredited all scientific proof that climate change is real by throwing a snowball in the dead of winter. He claimed that many areas on the East Coast had record lows, but the fact that 2014 was the warmest year on record was irrelevant. While DC had an unseasonably cold winter, the West Coast had an unseasonably warm winter.
This guy is the chair of the Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee. This guy makes major decisions on how to combat climate change, and he doesn't even believe it's real.
Despite the sea level rising nearly 7 inches in the last century, the global temperature rise, warming oceans, shrinking ice sheets, glacial retreat, and extreme weather events, people still believe that it is a made-up phenomenon. The oil and coal companies must have a stockpile of those really big checks so it can fit all those zeros on it.
We could all be like Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson. According to USA Today, Johnson stated that the sun will eventually grow to encompass the earth. So why throw money at solving climate change? If we solved all of our problems like this, the purge would happen every day. Why have any sorts of rules or regulations? If the sun is going to kill us, why would we ever work again?
Don't jump the gun, Eli. Some legislators are at least trying to find creative solutions to limit pollution.
Yo, dog, that rhyme was fire.
Bars. In 2009, Congress barely passed the American Clean Energy and Security Act by 7 votes. This act established a few systems to reduce pollution, one of which was called emissions trading.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
No, emissions trading legislation allocates carbon credits to companies based on their expected output. The companies spend their carbon credits by polluting. If the company underpollutes, they can sell their excess carbon credits to another who has polluted too much.
What could go wrong?
Read the teleprompter, Eli.
Oh, right. This sounds like a flexible compromise, and it is, but can actually allow for more economic manipulation and more pollution across the country.
Some polluters don't care to change their emissions outputs at all. They simply find companies that have underpolluted and buy the unused carbon credits from the cheapest seller. For some huge companies, this is more affordable than going green.
This can hurt smaller organizations that have made the effort to go green. No reasonable small business owner would risk economic manipulation for the sake of the environment, especially when the manipulators aren't doing anything to help the environment themselves.
Big businesses also have an easier time getting more carbon credits than they need. When being allocated the carbon credits, a larger polluter can exaggerate pollution estimates. Small business have much less ability to fudge the numbers because they have less numbers to fudge.
Until individuals take it upon themselves to fight the climate change, evil corporations will do what they do best and evade the law to the bitter end.
Back to you, Afik.
Let's go over to Chris Ryder with international news. Chris.
Thanks, Afik. In 2007, Canada's largest province, Quebec, began collecting a carbon tax on hydrocarbons. It was the first state or province in North America to do this. 1 year later, British Columbia followed suit with its own carbon tax. Since then, the tax has grown to its current rate of $20.40 per short ton of CO2.
What's a short ton?
Sorry, I forgot I have to translate for you Americans. I think you call them tons?
Chris, you're an American too.
Not the point. Now, from 2008 to 2013, emissions in British Columbia dropped over 6%, while the rest of the country experienced a 3.5% increase. And during the same period of time, emissions per capita in British Columbia dropped nearly 13%, while they dropped less than 5% in the rest of Canada. I should be packing up my smart car with reusable bags and moving to BC right now.
Wait, Chris, dropping emissions doesn't mean the carbon tax is necessarily a good thing. What financial impact has the tax had?
Well, in addition to reducing emissions, the carbon tax has even spurred economic growth. British Columbia has economically outperformed every other province since implementing the tax. And by taxing carbon emissions, the government has allowed itself to lower individual and business taxes and remain revenue neutral with their taxes. Guys, they lower taxes and harmful CO2 emissions. Seriously, why am I not riding a moose across the border to go hug Justin Trudeau?
Are there countries in other parts of the world that are doing similar things? Surely Canada can't be the only country trying to be environmentally friendly.
Oh yeah, other countries. Well, look at Iceland. Recently, Reykjavik announced it aims to become carbon neutral by 2040. Geothermal energy heats all the housing in the city and its surrounding suburbs, and hydroelectric power generates all of their electricity. Iceland, using the ground to heat things up. Iceland!
But doesn't the location of the island give Iceland an advantage when it comes to geothermal power?
It does, but they're doing other things as well. They also plan to make all of their vehicles run on clean energy. Additionally, the city is trying to triple the number of people who use public transportation by 2030. But back to the point, we could all be breathing fresh air and hanging out with Jim Carrey and Ryan Reynolds if we moved to Canada.
Chris, you know not all Canadians live in Canada, right?
Wait, what?
Thanks, Chris. While a lot of places are going green independently, there have also been formal arrangements between various countries, like at the Paris Climate Conference.
Last December, 195 countries met in Paris and adopted the first ever universal, legally binding global climate deal. The agreement isn't due to enter force until 2020, but the US is already falling short on its pledges.
The US ratified the Paris deal earlier this month, but research from the journal Nature Climate Change shows that the US will fail to meet requirements without additional measures.
Under the climate deal, in 10 years' time, the US would have to reduce its emissions to about 27% of last decade's levels. However, researchers only predict a reduction of 7 to 21%, and that's if the country continues with currently existing and proposed regulations.
Without proper funding and bipartisan legislation, the US will most likely fall short, and it won't be the only country to do so. But it's also important to note that the Paris Accords are a big deal. Countries like China and India even signed the deal, and they're two of the world's largest polluters.
But one could beckon the question, what's the point in making agreements to be environmentally friendly if you can't enforce the regulations?
Whether you believe in climate change or not, the sad reality is that things are changing and we may not be able to stop it. Environmentally friendly options are expensive, and a lot of places can't afford to implement such programs.
Climate change is indisputable. It is so much more than a sad polar bear on a tiny iceberg in Antarctica. Ocean levels are rising. Summers are going to be scorching hot, and winters will have extreme weather, such as blizzards or torrential rain. There are many ways we can help our little blue planet so it can be habitable to our children and everyone that comes after them.
Governments and organizations continue to struggle to cooperate in the fight against climate change. Until they reach a series of effective resolutions, every single person can do their part to help reduce our carbon footprint. Recycle, reuse water bottles, carpool, eat more tofurkey or something. And most importantly, vote for legislators that will push for comprehensive green choices.
Weather has caused a decline in agricultural production locally and internationally. There are giant islands of garbage floating around the Pacific Ocean, for goodness sake. People want to deny scientific fact, and that is the greatest danger the planet faces today. You can be the difference. You can save the world from the mistakes of the past. This is The World Tonight.